Hi, everybody, and welcome to Nomadic Diaries. This is your host, Doreen Cumberford. This mini podcast is for the NaPodPoMo podcasting month, which is the National Podcasters Posting Month. The entire goal of these podcasts is just to give you mini segments of content and to build the podcast creation muscles for Nomadic Diaries. Today, I wanted to share a bit of reading based on hospitality. I wrote the book Life in the Camel Lane, which was published in 2020. And one of the things that I talked a lot about in the book about was the things that made a difference, that changed me at depth by the time I had left Saudi Arabia. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is if you are an explorer and you are a short or long-term expat, whether nomadic or settled, we want to make the Nomadic Diaries a place for you to come and listen to content that is meaningful. And one of the most meaningful things for me about living overseas has been the life lessons that have really hit me at depth. And one of the three things that I learned in the Middle East was tolerance, patience, and also the art of hospitality. So this is a little reading by someone that I had read in order to give me a bigger background on the subject of why hospitality is so important and why it's practiced so vigorously and so beautifully in other parts of the world. The ancient virtue of hospitality imposes duties on the host and the guest. There's not one variety of olives on the tables, but three, and hummus, and eggplant, some pita, pickles, and white cheese. There are two main courses, in case one might not be to the guest's taste, and fresh cucumbers and tomatoes, okra, onions, eggs. Everywhere in the Middle East, the traveler is overwhelmed by hospitality. The virtue seems an ineluctable product of the landscape. Basically, I think that word means it's inseparable. The environment and the practice of hospitality are very closely married. Even as we traverse it in our air-conditioned car with our liters of water at our side, we're stunned by the heat, the distances between the towns whose names reveal their most salient feature. Beersheba, Shiva's well, Ain Gidi spring. To refuse a man or woman refreshment in such a place is to let him die. To threaten the open-handedness that nomadic peoples must depend on to survive. No wonder then that the landscape that gave birth to the three great monotheistic religions produced in their adherents so great an emphasis on the virtue of hospitality. In the Quran, as in the Hebrew and Christian Bibles, the mistreatment of strangers is a sure way to incur divine wrath. Pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. For example, all three traditions contrast the behavior of Abraham, who does honor to strangers approaching his tent, and that of the Sodomites, who demand that the same strangers be turned over to them. In the biblical account, Abraham rushes from the door of his tent to meet the three visitors, and he prostrates himself. He says, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant." Beyond the morsel of bread, Abraham prepares a feast for his guests, who of course turn out to be angels, with news that his wife Sarah will bear him a son. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because it seems like the engendered practice of hospitality, which has been launched and lodged in the invisible side of Middle Eastern people since the beginning of time. This goes back to Abraham, is such a pattern. And it really struck me that, if you didn't feed people, they would die. And so hospitality was the most powerful gift, the most powerful instrument, and the most powerful privilege that you could extend. So I have to tell you, when we lived in Saudi Arabia, we lived on a compound most of the time, which is a very different type of living experience from being in an English village or a European city or any sort of normal social situation. And I have to say that every time we drove out into the desert, and we occasionally got really curious and would drive up across the dunes. Sometimes we were out dune busting, or sometimes we were driving across pipelines, teaching our daughter how to drive, or occasionally we were out on an adventure, and you encounter people who have tents, still very nomadic. But the thing that I got a kick out of was, the tents where they had the Mercedes parked outside, and they had the great big huge dishes that said that they had status and that they were in touch with the world, because these people were modern day nomads. And every time we drove up to a tent and we just showed up, no warning, these people didn't know us, we were always met with the greatest, kindest welcome. First of all, the gentleman or the fellow would come out in his long dish dash, often a gray or black one, and not the city type dress that you see from Middle Eastern men in the city or in a corporate environment, but a dark color. And they would come out and they would say salam alaikum, and you go through the greeting procedure, and then they would say, alhamdulillah, how's life, how's it going? And then sometimes they would show us a little bit of their mini compound. In one case, they had hundreds of baby goats, and they opened the gate and just let all the baby goats run out into the desert, and all we could hear was pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter. It was such a sweet noise on the sounds of the pitter patter of those little paws on the sand. And I'll never forget that. That just really hit me, or landed inside me in a place that I had never imagined that would happen. And so the other part about hospitality is it's very unexpected, but it's always very genuine. And he would automatically, the host would automatically turn and talk to the women. We didn't talk to the women directly initially, because as is the custom. And he would instruct them to put they would have these old sort of tin painted teapots, and they would fill them up with water and put them on the fire. And that was a symbol that we were expected to hang around for tea. It was just such a generous gesture, because can you imagine just strangers showing up at your house? They just drive up and park outside and walk up to your door, and the expectation is that you will bring them in, you will talk to them, you will discover each other. And in each case, I don't know who was the more curious. I don't know if we were the most curious or if they were the most curious, but they would ask us about who we were. Of course, they understood that the corporation that we worked for was a big Saudi company, and they'd all heard of it, and they made assumptions from that. But it didn't matter who we were. What mattered was that they honored that tradition of hospitality. And it said, "Let now a little water be fetched, and wash your feet, and recline yourself under a tree. I will fetch a morsel of bread, and stay ye your heart. After that ye shall pass on." This is from Genesis, sorry. And I just like to say that I think that hospitality is not associated with how we necessarily treat friends, neighbors, or members of our own family, but these are people in the distance he's never seen before or never heard of. And I would just like to mention that I think it's one of the principles of being a successful expat or nomad anywhere in the globe is making other people welcome and getting curious about them and asking questions. So let curiosity be your guide. Let curiosity be your dominant feature. Let curiosity lead the way for you. And I'd like to wish you the best of success and share. We'd love to hear what adventure you're on. If you have a very special story that you believe would be applicable to our listeners in learning how to be incredible, successful global adventurers who manage all the phases and all the ups and downs of the expatriate and international lifestyles, reach out to us. And we'd love it if you would tell other people about the podcast, if you'd share, like, subscribe, press any buttons you can find. Anyway, this is Doreen. I'm signing off for National Podcasters promo or posting month for today. We're halfway through the month. It's November 15th. Thank you. Bye-bye.